Thank you for joining us for today's podcast. My name is Fraser Cobb, the director of ACRO, the American College of Radiation Oncology. We look forward to today's program where we're going to touch on a very personal topic for everybody, personal finance and knowing your worth. We are really pleased to have Dr. Brian Lally with us. Dr. Lally is a member of the Board of Chancellors of ACRO from Penn, and he is going to be the host of today's program. Dr. Lally?
Thanks, Fraser. As he said, my name's Brian Lally. I'm a radiation oncologist with Penn Medicine, and I'm also on the Board of Chancellors for ACRO. Today, we're going to be talking about a little bit of a different type of subject that's not really related to medicine, but is critical to all physicians. And it's about a subject that I wish that I was more engaged or more listened to when I was earlier in my career. And I really wish they also taught this subject matter in med school, in addition to chemistry, pharmacology, physiology, and the other subjects. I'm really pleased today to introduce my good friend, Ron DiGiaimo, who is the CEO of Revenue Cycle and Coding Strategy. Ron, can you say hello?
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you all.
Why don't we get right into it?
Sure.
Ron, are you able to tell us a little bit about the difference between appreciating assets and depreciating assets?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think everyone should look at their finances and become familiar with, we've all heard the terms income statement and balance sheet. And you have a personal income statement, you have a personal balance sheet. And when you look at this, you think the balance sheet is all you own versus what you owe. So what you own versus what you owe, and the difference between the two is your net worth. So when you are looking at appreciating assets or depreciating assets would be, I bought a rental property in addition to my home, and that rental property is giving me additional income. Meanwhile, the property itself is gaining value each year. So that's an appreciating asset. When you go and you buy that car you've wanted, that boat, other similar toys, those are fun, but those are depreciating assets. They're not adding to your wealth.
That's good information, Ron. It's one of those things that we always got to take stock of at every couple of years in our life. Let's now begin to talk about what happens and the financial pressures that occur when residents finish their residency and begin to enter practice and have that increase in income, and how it is important for them to build their personal wealth.
So first of all, congratulations on becoming a radiation oncologist or being a radiation oncologist. That's an incredible feat, as you know, in and of itself. And we have to keep in mind that physicians in general, and in particular, radiation oncologists, are in the top 1% to 2% of earners in the wealthiest nation on the entire planet. Okay, so when you look at it like that, you start thinking, okay, well, I've gotten used to living, although maybe not the way I want to, on $50,000 to $60,000 as a resident. Then all of a sudden you have this bolus of cash that starts coming in because you're now an attending. That could be anywhere from $250,000 to $350,000. So when you start having a multiple like that goes from 50,000 to 350,000, 7 times jump, you have a lot of additional disposable income. And then what ends up happening is lifestyle inflation starts coming in. And if you start thinking about it, most of you, I would suspect, have had some type of school loans. If you start looking at things and don't let your lifestyle inflation take into place as soon as you had a rate increase, a lot of you are going to be wanting to get depreciating assets, that brand new car you've been waiting for. Get a new car, sure, of course, but do you need to have the top of the line Mercedes when a Honda Accord is a great car and it's going to get you from place to place and brand new for a while? And here's why. In the first 10 years of your practice. So Dr. 30, if you can save $50,000 a year, and that sounds like a lot, but it isn't. It is not a lot when you're used to living on $50,000 or $60,000 a year, and you move up to $250,000 a year or $350,000 a year. $50,000 to set aside is not a lot of money. Dr. 30, by the time they're 65, if you're doing compounded interest at 7% at the age of 30, by the time you're 65, you will have $7.5 million. If you wait until you are Dr. 40 and you do that same compounding at 7% and you do that same 50,000, you're now headed towards $3.5 million. Now, anybody on the planet is going to be happy with either number, of course. $3.5 million is still a ton of money. $7.5 million is better, in my opinion.
Well, Ron, that's really good information. It's kind of some of those, I remember early in my career when I had first finished residency and then went into fellowship. Those years were the years I was probably focusing more on my academic career and not as much as what was going on with my checkbook. Is there anything else we should be doing that's really crucial to making sure that our wealth accumulation is occurring?
Yes.
So that when we get to later ages, so that we're prepared and not missing any opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it reminds me, Brian, when I was young, you and I are personal friends. So I've told you before, about 24, I was already married. And there was a patient who came in, prostate patient coming in every day for radiation therapy for 7.5 weeks. And he asked me about mutual funds. He asked me about automatic investing. I told him I didn't have much money. I had I was just out of school. I was just married. I didn't have any kind of additional disposable income. And then he started telling me how $100 a month, as small as $100 a could change and compound over time. And he asked me every single day if I had researched it. And then finally, about 3 weeks, he started bringing me in the applications. And finally, I was like, wow, this patient's not going to give up. So, but he changed my life. And now I think that if you look and start doing auto investing, pay yourself first. Everybody's heard this before, and this is probably not new news to anybody, but do you follow through? Do you pay yourself first? And most of you, because I know I did at the time, heard pay yourself 10% of your salary, but that's not good enough. It's definitely not good enough for a radiation oncologist. A radiation oncologist needs to pay themselves first bill 20% of their salary. Invest it, auto invest it. So that means that get yourself wherever you get hired, make sure they have some type of 401k, a profit sharing or matching, something like that, and put the maximum in. If you cannot get to 50,000 per year, start looking at Roth IRAs, start looking at Roth investments, some other type of outside investment that is automatically deducted from your pay and automatically invested. Because once it's automatically invested, it disappears, it's not accessible to you. And now you've created that compounding that is necessary. Obviously, if you can go above and beyond that, if you can start paying off your student loans and start paying off additional, the other things, this seems like a small thing, but my father-in-law taught me this, is that most of us, when we get a mortgage, we pay our monthly mortgage, and some of us are going to pay additional principal each month, and that's a good thing. And if you're able to do that, that's a fantastic thing. What we did was, instead of paying a monthly note, we paid our note every 2 weeks. And so what ended up happening was you end up making 13 payments per year that way. It seems like a small thing, but by every 2 weeks, you make 13 payments instead of 12. So an entire month is 100% of it is to principal. It allowed us to pay off one of our homes in many years ahead of schedule. So it's something that you might consider for yourself. It's small, but it does help.
That's good info, Ron. You know, one thing I did that was kind of helpful for some people in academics is the NIH has a loan repayment program. And that covered a lot of my a lot of my medical school debt was relieved using that program.
Brian, good for you. I mean, I think it's wonderful. You're obviously fortunate, one of the few that is able to do that. If you have those kind of things, obviously take advantage of them. It's fantastic. Military, all those kind of things are wonderful. You know, one of the things that I'm thinking of is when you are a mature physician and you start having kids and your own kids start going into college, one of the things that I've tried to talk our children into, I've got 3 daughters, is yes, we're going to pay for your college and we're going to help you with all that. And we've done some college savings. And oh, by the way, with the auto savings, one of the things that I would encourage you to do is put away $5,000 per month per kid. And if you can do that at as early as when they're 1, by the time they're 18, you're going to have more than enough for their college, all of their apartment, car, all supply, everything. So you should do that, assuming they're going to go in state. Sometimes they're going to go out of state, and that's okay. But if they go out of state, what I've encouraged my kids to do is go ahead and take the loans out. One of my kids is going to OU. We live in Texas. Her annual fees are $45,000 per year. I've asked her to take out student loans. Why? Because then we take that $45,000 per year and invest it for her. And if it's 4 years or however many years it is, at the end of that time period, she can take all the gains. She'll have all the principal. So at 6 months when the loans are due, she can just pay off the loan in full. And then the principal, whatever it is extra free money off of somebody else's money. I don't know if that's what you were getting at, Brian, but that's what I would advise.
Oh, I wish I would have met you 20 years ago, because it's one of those issues that I am struggling with right now, how to make sure I can get my kids through college so that they can get a good job like I've got and have a profession. It is really at the top of my stressors list at these days.
Well, you know who changed this is all that prostate patient, Brian. So I love patients and we all love our patients, but like this person, everybody says they made a patient at some point in their career who massive he did. He really did.
That's good to hear. You know, another stressor in my life these days, and I'm sure it's with everyone else, because it's really changed not just the way we do business, not just the way we practice medicine, but the way we live, has been COVID. Yeah. And it's really made me make sure that I have some type of emergency relief fund just in case I get seriously ill or some of my family members get seriously ill. Yeah, can you give a little bit discussion about the importance of having a emergency fund available for yourselves?
Yes, absolutely. And, whatever your annual salary is, you should really have 2 months of your annual salary available to you in cash. So if you are looking at, obviously you're going to have all your investments in your assets, but usually if you are investing in stocks or funds or bonds or CDs, whatever it is, certainly retirement, to pull it out, you might sell at a loss, you might have a financial penalty, all of the associated, it may take you 2 or 3 days to get it to you. You should have all of that, but that is not touchable. What you should also have is in your checking account is 2 months of your annual salary available to you in cash. It creates so much stress-free living. You don't have to worry about what ifs or what's going on because it's available to you and it's immediately available to you. That is a concept that a lot of people think about but don't really practice. And if and when an emergency, I hope nobody runs into an emergency, but it's always good to have it because it's not just you. It could be your parents, it could be your spouse's family, it could be one of your children, etc.
Okay, another thing I've been meaning to ask you about, and this is something that I've done, and I actually think this may have been where I've been okay. I probably could have done a little bit better. But through a friend, I was introduced to an insurance agent. And one of the things that this person stressed to me was the importance of having protection in case I die for whatever reason. And that my wife and kids are taken care of. And so I do have a life insurance policy. And recently, the individual, he was a good friend, because I had a little bit more income, wanted me to get a little bit more protection for my wife and kids in case something happens to me, or also in case something happens where I'm not able to practice. But insurance is one of those ones that I've always have a hard time understanding. And I really need a lot of assistance in understanding not just life insurance, but other types of insurance related to my practice. Can you explain that for us?
It's interesting you brought that up. My father-in-law was an insurance broker, and he, looking back now, he gave me a lot of very helpful advice, and he sold whole life policies, but he would instruct me and say, there's only a very, very, very few people who are right for whole life policies. Whole life policies are meant for selling. They're not meant for buying. And when you talk about a physician who's going to have large disposable income over a career, you want to get term life insurance. And with term life insurance, you can get a really large $1 to $2 million policy at really not very expensive. Whole life is a smaller amount and more expensive. So you can sell whole life like an asset, but it's not worth it because the investment, the compounded interest that you will have from the stock market is wildly more lucrative than a whole life policy. The other thing is, of course, you want to have malpractice insurance. You want to have disability insurance to carry through short and long-term disability. My father-in-law had a back issue, and he was forced to retire in his 50s, but he was paid full salary until he was like 80, I think 85 years old. Extraordinary. And so, but he was an insurance broker and he had an incredible policy. So it happened to work for him. A long-term policy is a must. Those are things that when you find a wealth manager, and a lot of physicians may not know what a wealth manager is. So I would encourage you to look at that and find a, Brian, we go to ACRO. So anybody who wants to know some details, I could talk about these, or maybe with Fraser, we could post on some reputable wealth managers. Here's the issue with radiation oncologists and physicians in general, your targets, right? Because those who are in the financial industry target those are the 1-2% earners in the nation and want to make money off of helping you make money. And that's okay to a degree as long as it's fair. We have some really good wealth managers. And what is in there is you want to make sure that they are watching out for you, that they've got they've created a trust for your children so that each one of your children, so that if something happens to you, all of your assets go into a trust. You save on taxes that way. You want to make sure that you've got a will, a written will, not just you know, I've talked about it and this is the way I want it to be. Everything's going to go to my spouse and then my kids. No, it's got to be written down. It needs to be updated as your children age, and certainly when they turn 18 and then again when they turn 25. What we did with our kids was obviously everything goes to each other's spouse, but then for our children from 18 to 25, it goes into a trust, and we have her sister and my brother that oversee the trusts. So a trusted person who's overseeing this. And then the assets are dwindled out, not for a controlling reason, but so that they fight the temptation of, oh, we got X amount to go do whatever we want. Well, you want to make sure that it is allowing them to live however many years, so in our opinion. You know, those are things, umbrella policies. I think that's what you were talking about, where you have a term life insurance, but then you buy extra on top of it, you know, for jewelry, for accidents that if you're covered for $250,000 for a car accident, somebody with your type of income, you want to have an umbrella policy on top of that so that they're not coming after your assets in addition to 200 in case something crazy happens. And I think one of the things while we're talking about insurable risk, we should also talk about some uninsurable risk. And where I'm coming from there is, I think most of you may know that I'm an expert witness for the Department of Justice and the Office of Inspector General. And I see some doctors earlier in their career trying to make some income quick, maybe not making the best decisions or getting wrapped around with the wrong person or group or whatever the situation is. And there are some things where you have gone, in the top most difficult specialty to get into, you're making a great income. Don't put your medical license at risk. And because that is the type of thing you can insure against. So drug abuse, you know, if there's an issue, go get help, but don't put your medical license at risk. Don't do prescribing issues. Don't get mixed up into that. Prescribing for somebody when you have not, you know, your friend, your neighbor, your cousin, whoever, they know you're a doctor and they're calling you asking for XYZ prescription. Well, unless you've examined them, unless you know them, unless you know what's going on with them, you don't really know what's going on there. And the temptation, I'm sure, is to help your friend out, but make sure that you actually know what's going on so you don't put your license at risk. The other things would be, you know, don't be an issue where, you know, you're bullying, you're throwing stuff, you're yelling at people, disruptive influence, that could, HIPAA violations. And certainly the last would be fraud and abuse, where it's like, oh my gosh, you know, if I get paid, you know, this dollar amount reporting 3 of these units, imagine what it's like to get paid for 30 of the units, even though I did 3 units, and they're willing to pay me for it. You know, those kind of, I get the temptation to make a fast buck, but it's just not necessary as a radiation oncologist because you're going to be wealthy regardless. Never put your medical license at risk. And those are things that you can't insure against. You know, I know this doctor who, he's a dermatologist, so we can bash him. He's not a radiation oncologist. And he took advantage of the system and ended up losing his license, going to jail, and now he's a really unhappy camper, and it's an unfortunate thing.
Yeah, the other thing I always tell not patients. The other thing I always tell the other physicians that I work with, whether in the field or not, and I say this to all friends, the other thing you never want to do is get behind the wheel of a car if you've been drinking.
Oh.
It's just one of those things you can never, ever do. Always have a designated driver.
Absolutely. 100%. And you know, Brian, today, I'm sure all three of us, Fraser, you, myself, we wouldn't do it. We'd get in an Uber. But you know, when we were in college, the little things were a little different back then. Well, maybe not you, Fraser. You're probably younger than us. But you know, I never drove crazy, but I was with friends who I knew they drove home after going to bars, and it was very different than, like, my kids. You have one drink, you better take an Uber. You better not get behind the wheel of a car. It's a thing. But you know what's funny is they understand that. They're like, well, obviously. So, you know, but again, everything is magnified for a radiation oncologist because you don't want to put that license at risk that you work so hard for.
Great comments, Ron. Is there anything else that we should be concerned about as we move more past our career into retirement? Any other ways that we could be planning for that you haven't already mentioned?
Yes, this is completely off the subject, and Fraser may end up editing this out. But if you're a radiation oncologist and you're going to tumor board, I will give you this bit of advice. At one time, I was a strategic analyst. And at one time, I was an executive with the largest publicly traded oncology firm in the world. And obviously, I'm prejudiced towards radiation oncologists in a good way. When you go to tumor board, in my opinion, radiation oncologists are generally the smartest ones in the room. However, they don't always make their opinion known because they think they're down the food chain and don't want to upset the surgeon or the medical oncologist. Here's a bit of advice. It's better to be respected than it is to be liked. Those who are sharp in time will both like and respect you. But somebody can like you and not respect you. It's more important to be respected than it is to be liked. Make your opinion known. And if somebody's off the handle in medical oncology or surgery, and you got the right answer as a rad-onc, say it. You can say it diplomatically, back it up. You know the answers. Too many rad-oncs and tumor boards are quiet these days, but that's my opinion. Totally off the subject.
Thanks, Ron. Well, I think that wraps it up for today's podcast.
You notice how Brian didn't say anything to that, Fraser.
Maybe I was going to say something, but I agree with you. I mean, to me, the thing is that to use the Jedi mind tricks to get everyone else to do what I want them to do. Yeah. And sometimes that's not by speaking, but just by knowing when not to speak to.
Well, that's something I still need to learn, clearly.
But I do value my team. And where I'm at currently, I like both the physicians that I work with a lot. I'm really enjoying them. I also like my team in my clinic, my lead therapist, Chrissy Morath, my fellow physician, Sonal Maekar, all my therapists, all my nurses, and my front desk team.
Good for you.
And so, you know, with them and the dosimetrists and the physicists who are also very good, we really give high quality care. And that's what I'm very proud of right now. I tend to avoid the other stuff, the politics, and I just want to stay off the radar to the most part, you know? But, you know, the goal right now is to finish my career, get into retirement, use this degree that I've earned and this profession that I practice to translate into a better life for my kids. And that's my goal right now.
Wow, that's great, man. Good for you. I love it.
So, but on that note, I think we're going to wrap this up. I do appreciate your time and all your wisdom, Ron. I'm really looking forward to seeing you in person in Fort Lauderdale at the annual meeting, March 9th to the 12th, where you're going to start it off with your Codorama on Wednesday. for 3 hours with all the updates that we have to be aware of as we go into doing more billing and documentation. And I think it's going to be a great meeting. I look to seeing everyone else in Fort Lauderdale at that time too. Stay safe.